Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown, and this will be my predictions video for UFC Fight Night 76 Poirier versus Duffy. But first, I'm going to show you the results of the last two events: Fight Night Japan Barnett versus Nelson, and UFC 192 Cormier versus Gustafsson. All right, so for Barnett versus Nelson, overall for the event, I was 4,481. I dropped a few spots for this event. I believe I started out 670 something. I think I went up to like 690, something like that. I can't remember. You could check my ranking from last time, but I'll show you my picks real quick here for Barnett versus Nelson. I picked Barnett. Just scroll through there. And then for UFC 192, I did a lot better. I finished 1720 overall for the event and moved up to 640, which was better than where I was at from before Fight Night Japan. So that was pretty good, and I'll just show you my picks there. Alright guys, that's it, and on to my predictions. Hey guys, this is the MMA breakdown, back with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 76, Poirier versus Duffy, taking place on October 24th in Dublin, Ireland. It is a Fight Pass card. And as always, follow me on Twitter. My link is in the description. But this card, the main and co-main events, I think are very good. High-level quality fights, Poirier versus Duffy and Miocic versus Rothwell. The rest of the card, not too excited for it. I'm not going to say it's a terrible card. I'm not going to be as critical of it as I usually am with the other international Fight Pass cards. It's not completely all filler. There are some good prospects here who've really made their names from these European Fight Pass shows, like Stevie Ray and Robert Whiteford from the last Scotland card. Really broke through, and I am interested in following these guys, but I don't think either of their opponents are that provide for really compelling matchups. And of course they have to do that to continue to build these guys, but most of the matchups seem like they're giving the hometown guy a really winnable fight, an opponent who no one really cares about or knows, just to continue to be able to push and market these guys, which I'd rather see more competitive fights, but yeah, just kind of indifferent about the card overall, except for the main and co-main. But let's get right into this, starting off with the Fight Pass preliminary card at middleweight, Bubba Bush versus Gareth McLellan. This is a fight I really don't know much about either fighter here, but both guys have fought in the UFC. When that's the case, I always make a pick, and I'll just go with Gareth McLellan. Both guys, I think, looked really bad coming off of their debut fights. Bush getting destroyed by Kevin Casey over a year ago. That was July of last year. Casey was able to get him down, got on top of him, and then just brutalized him with elbows. I think actually knocked him out cold with them. And then Gareth McLellan lost his fight to Bartosz Fabinski, got dominated, got out-wrestled, taken out over and over again at will, and offered no resistance, really. I'm just going to go with McLellan because he didn't get finished. I do think Casey was a higher-level fighter than Fabinski, but I really don't know. I'm going to have to listen to someone else's analysis who's more familiar with these fighters. And also McLellan, he's a South African guy. You have to respect those guys. They look mean and tough, so got to give some love to the South Africans. going with McLellan, but not based on much at all. All right, next up at featherweight, Darren Elkins versus Robert Whiteford. This is a matchup like I was talking about. I'm really interested in seeing Whiteford again, and a win over Elkins really means something. And Elkins should provide a test, but I'm just not too high on the matchup here. I'd rather see Whiteford pitted against another up-and-comer. Elkins just doesn't seem too relevant to me anymore. But the question for me here is whether Elkins can establish the takedown, push him up against the fence, just be able to dominate him with that, with the clinch and the takedowns. And I don't know if he can do it. Elkins, I think, has really lost some steam. He's taken a lot of damage, has a lot of wear and tear now. His last fight with Hakran Diaz, which was a while ago, might have been over a year ago. It was last December, not quite a year, but was really beaten up on the feet in that fight. Robert Whiteford, I think his knockout over Paul Redmond last time was great. His stand-up looked vastly improved, was really composed on the feet, picked his shots, and was able to knock him out early. And Whiteford is capable on the ground, has a judo background, had no trouble with Daniel Pineda on the ground, who is a good submission fighter, was able to get on top and nullify his submission game, and took a round off of Jimmy Hedis. Can Elkins impose that wrestling on him and take him down? He's a grinder. He's been able to do that to other dangerous strikers like Lucas Martins, Diego Brandao. I just think Elkins, like I said, is kind of shop worn at this point, has lost some steam. Really not a guy who's made big improvements in his time in the UFC. I mean, was on a win streak, but he wins fights because he's tough and he grinds, but he hasn't really been adding skills. He's not a finisher, doesn't really have much of a submission game. His hands are not very good. We've seen him get blasted by guys like Chad Mendez and his last fight, like I said, Diaz really put a beating on him. So Whiteford, with his vastly improved striking, I think he's going to have a huge stand-up advantage. I think he can hold his own on the ground, but wouldn't be surprised if Elkins is able to just out-wrestle him. I'm going to take Whiteford, though. He has the momentum. Seems like a rising prospect. Great finish last time going with Whiteford here. But I do think it is close and could definitely see Elkins winning. Next up at welterweight, Cathal Pendred versus Tom Breese. Another fight where I'm going to have to listen to someone who knows more about Tom Breese before I make my official pick here. But right now, Tom Breese coming off of his debut win, knocking out Luis Dutra, and it was in the first round. I don't quite remember how the fight was playing out before then. I think Dutra might have been closing the distance. I think might have been clinching with him, tying him up, and then Breeze, I think, just caught him coming in with a straight punch and stonewalled him, knocked him out cold. Cathal Pendred, can he, basically like Elkins and Whiteford, Pendred just likes to tie up with you, grab hold and drag you down. He's not great at it. When he does get you down, he doesn't keep you there for the whole round, but can do that enough to win some rounds. And of course, he's had fights where he definitely deserved to lose and ended up getting the decision. I think he's very slowly been getting a little more effective with that kind of lay and pray game, being able to drag guys down. Even though he's been dropped in every one of his UFC fights, maybe not his last one with Howard, but even against Augusto Montano was dropped briefly. He usually always survived. Well, in the UFC, he has always survived, the early onslaught. But his hands are just terrible. And a guy like Breeze, who had a one-punch knockout like that, I feel like I should take Breeze here. Howard didn't really let his hands go, and Pendred was still very uncomfortable with him. Not really able to get off any offense, and I just don't know how well Breeze can create separation, keep Pendred off of him. I'm going to go with Breeze, though. He had the knockout, and anyone who has knockout power like that, I think should be able to put Pendred away. And, Pendred, the guys he's fought, none of those guys, I think, had a knockout win, and they all dropped him. Umalatov, Mike King, Sean Spencer, none of those guys have had a knockout finish in the UFC or even TKO, and Breese having a one-punch knockout win. I tend to think that that'll be enough. So I'm going to go with Breese here, but I would listen to someone's analysis who knows more about Breese. All right, next up at women's strawweight, Ashling Daly versus Erica Almeida. Again, just not a compelling matchup. Daly, I am interested in her. Liked her on Tough. I liked her UFC performances. But Almeida, even for the women's strawweight division that is pretty much still brand new and young, Almeida seems like probably the least compelling and least well-known fighter in the division. And I basically think this is Daly's fight to lose. Erica Almeida was dominated by Juliana Lima in her debut. That was her only UFC fight about a year ago. Was just taken down over and over again, and that was the fight pretty much. Whereas Ashling Daly seems like a pretty capable grappler. Submitted Alex Chambers in her tough finale win, and then in her last fight against Randa Marcos, that was a really competitive fight. I thought Marcos would be able to control her more with the wrestling, but Daly had her moments in some of the scrambles and on the ground. I was pretty impressed, even though she lost. So I think Daly's just going to be the better grappler and probably get a submission. So I'm going with Ashling Daly. At middleweight, Scott Askham versus Krzysztof Jotko. And again, Askham coming off of a nice finish. It was an exciting fight, and Jotko just seems like a very even-keeled fighter who doesn't really have exciting fights and has a very average skill set. But I am going to go with Askham here just because he seems like the more aggressive guy, more wild, goes for the finish. And Jotko, while I don't think he's looked bad in any of his fights, just looks very average. Had a win over Tor Trowan. I think he might have hurt him at some point in the fight. His fight against Bruno Santos in his debut that he won definitely deserved to lose. Just got held up against the fence and defended against the takedown, but really did nothing else in that fight. And then his fight against Magnus Siedenblad was submitted, and Askham also lost to Siedenblad, but even though he was backed up against the fence and getting outstruck from the clinch, I think managed to drop Siedenblad with a front kick, I believe. And his last fight against Antonio Dos Santos, again, I think he was backed up against the fence and landed a knee, I think, from the tie clinch that knocked him out. So he's a real aggressive fighter, throws back, and Jotko just doesn't seem he doesn't seem able to engage in a brawl like that. I think his fights have been pretty slow-paced, so I'm going to go with Askham. All right, next up at flyweight, Neil Seery versus John Delos Reyes. Neil Seery, I think, has been a lot more consistent. Delos Reyes really hasn't shown too much to me in the UFC. Lost his debut to Dustin Kimura, dropped him right out of the gate, but in following up got submitted. Koraguchi got him out of there in the first round, knocked him out. And then his last fight with Rolda Sangcheon, a back-and-forth brawl where both guys got hurt and almost got put away. He ended up being able to get the submission, but Seery's a pretty consistent guy. I think he's pretty one-dimensional, but it doesn't really matter because he is effective. He's got great hand speed, just comes forward, puts a ton of volume on guys, has great cardio. Really impressed me against Chris Beal, who's a much younger and far more athletic fighter, but couldn't make use of that. Neil Seery outworked him and had Beal gassed by the end of the first round. And in that fight also, I was really impressed with Seery's defensive jiu-jitsu on the ground. Was throwing the leg over the shoulder, doing the rubber guard thing, and showed good awareness off of his back, good defense. His last fight with Louis Smolka was doing well early, coming forward. I think dropped Smolka, but Smolka got on top of him, and there was a big strength advantage. He was able to dominate him from there pretty much. I don't think Reyes will have that same grappling advantage, although he does seem like a decent submission guy. But on the feet, I think Seery will beat him to the punch, and just be more active, has the better hand speed. I'm going with Seery for a decision. All right, next up at lightweight, Stevie Ray versus Michael Lebout. Again, Stevie Ray loved both of his previous 2 UFC fights, but Michael Lebout, another guy who just looks like a very average dude who honestly shouldn't be in the UFC if it wasn't for all these international shows where they just need a bunch of regional talent to provide filler for these shows. But definitely taking Stevie Ray here. I think this might be one of the biggest mismatches on the card. Finished both of his previous 2 opponents against Marcin Bandel. Took him down, got on top of him, controlled him, was real physical, and was just hammering away with big ground and pound, but pretty methodically, and got the finish there. In his last fight with Leonardo Mafra, they came out, were exchanging. It was a brawl, and he just had the more accurate shots and was able to connect, clipped him, and put him away. Michael Lebout seems like a very average kickboxer, fights at a pretty, kind of slow pace. His last fight against Teemu Mclelan, I thought there were some moments on the ground where he just looked very amateurish. I don't quite remember what happened. I think Mclelan might have just passed his guard or mounted him or something, but I thought Lebout looked very bad at times on the ground there. And this fight with Sergio Moraes got outstruck by a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter, which is never really a good thing. So, Ray looks like the finisher, the guy with power. I think he'll be much more physical if it gets to the ground. I think he's going to finish Lebout. So going with Ray. All right, next up, last prelim fight at lightweight, Norman Parke versus Reza Madadi. I am not a fan of Norman Parke. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. The Irish fans love to support their hometown guys, but, Norman Parke is just not really even a good mid-level fighter in the UFC. I've been saying that, calling his last several fights since Tough. I followed him since Tough, and it hasn't really panned out for him in the UFC. He got some stiff competition in his last couple of fights, Trinaldo and Tebow, but the guy just doesn't have a lot of tools. And the Irish fans have always called me out on this when I'm critical of him. But you saw in both of his 2 last fights against these slow kind of methodical grinders, he just doesn't have a lot of tools on the feet at all. He does have pace and aggression, which he can make work against some guys. The only guy he's finished is Naoki Kotani, which I don't think really means much, but you can see there when he's able to come forward and put that pace on guys, he can be effective. But all his other fights have been really lackluster. They've been these really kind of sloppy stand-up affairs. He's not really dominant in the clinch, doesn't make use of his judo, and just not really a fan of the guy. But I think this is a really winnable matchup for him. Madadi, coming off of almost a 3-year-long layoff now, I think was arrested in Sweden for stealing handbags, and I don't know why the UFC would want him back, but an extremely wild brawler who doesn't have much skill when it's not on the ground. Submitted Michael Johnson in his last fight, but I don't think I'd give him about a 0% chance of repeating that today. Had a real wild brawl with Cristiano Marcelo where they just threw haymakers at each other for 3 rounds, and he lost the fight. But I think Parke is skilled enough in this matchup to get the win. I think his stand-up will be better, should have better cardio, have a strength advantage. I don't see Madadi, just ending up in a scramble and Darce choking him. So going with Norman Parke for a decision. All right, on to the main card. Flyweight, Patrick Holohan versus Louis Smolka. This might be one of the most compelling matchups on the card. This is actually a really good one, and I'm not quite sure who to take. Both of these guys, their strength is on the mat when they're grappling. Holohan should have the better stand-up. Smolka, I was really impressed with him in his debut against Alptek and Oskilic. He's real tall and long for a flyweight. I think he's like 5'11" or something, and was using his reach really well in that fight. And when Oskilic tried to take him down, he would reverse him mid takedown, end up on top. Has a good mount. And then lost to Chris Cariaso, just couldn't. Chris Cariaso just had the better kickboxing, and he was able to get inside. Smolka was really kind of lost on the feet, but again, he was able to get mount late in that fight, and you saw that skill there. This fight against Richie Vasilik was just getting hammered, really getting beaten up on the feet. Had no answer, and then pulled out a Hail Mary sidekick to the face, knocked him out in the third round, which was nice. And then his last fight against Neil Seery, I think got dropped again early, was losing on the feet, but on the ground, had a big strength and size advantage, was able to dominate him there, got mount and was working a guillotine, like a one-armed guillotine from mount, and he was gripping his own body. He wrapped the arm all the way around his head and put the hand back on his own torso to finish didn't finish it, but came very close. And I thought that was kind of innovative, so I liked that. But as far as this matchup goes, I don't know. I feel Smolka. I think he'll have a strength advantage on the ground. Holohan, I kind of had written him off after his loss to Kalades. I thought, just looked like a guy who uses a lot of movement and is dynamic, but when it comes to the fundamentals, got out wrestled, let Kalades get inside and box him up from there. But since then rebounded with wins over Shane Howell and his last fight over Von Lee, where he has decent striking and his grappling is pretty solid. A good positional grappler, not great at getting the finish with the submission. He comes very close as the submission fully locked on. The Shane Howell fight, it was the rear naked, and the Von Lee fight, he had a triangle, had them fully locked on, but couldn't finish. I think that might hurt him here because Smolka, I think, might be a little stronger, and I think might be able to take advantage of the positional battle on the ground. On the feet, though, I would expect Holohan to have the advantage. It's real close. I think Holohan's been a little more consistent, but even that Von Lee fight, he was stuck in a triangle for like 4 minutes of the first round, and as soon as Lee got out, he immediately took Holohan's back as he tried to get up and nearly choked him out with one hand with just like 30 seconds left in the round. If he gives an opportunity like that to Smolka, I think Smolka takes it and finishes him. I've talked too long about this fight because it is a really compelling matchup, but oh man, I think I'm going to side with Holohan. I think he's been a little more consistent, but it should be a really fun back and forth ground battle, and Smolka, I think, might have the better setup with his submissions and might be a little stronger positionally on the ground. I'm going to take Holohan though. Yeah. All right, next up at welterweight, Nicholas Dalby versus Darren Till. This fight I'm just not real excited about. I don't know why everyone got so excited about Dalby after his debut win over Alizu Zaleski dos Santos. I didn't think he looked that good. I mean, looked just okay, very average. Had decent kickboxing, mixed up the kicks and the punches well, landed a lot of shots. But never really hurt him and got a few takedowns, but I just wasn't too impressed. Darren Till against Wendell Oliveira, I didn't think he was getting much done early in the fight. Got tied up a few times in the clinch, but then I think it was the second round, was able to get Wendell down and just jumped on him with these elbows from top and knocked him out cold. It was great to see him pull a finish out of nowhere. So I think Till is the more dangerous guy, will be more opportunistic, looking for the finish. Dalby, I think, though, is a little more well-rounded and just overall more consistent. So I think I'm going to go with Dalby here, but I really don't know. I don't know much about these guys other than what they showed in their debut fights, but I will take Dalby for a decision. All right, next up at heavyweight, Stipe Miocic versus Ben Rothwell. Fantastic matchup, has title implications. I got to go with Miocic, though. He just has the far more well-rounded game, has a higher level skill set. Rothwell's been really underrated his last couple of fights, but the thing with Rothwell is he's a one-shot guy, meaning he only needs one big move to win, but his game is not going to be, he's not skilled enough to go 3 rounds with Miocic and win a decision. Even in the Brandon Vera fight, nothing was happening until the 3rd round where Rothwell just came alive and went after him and clipped him. Overeem fight, I picked Rothwell to win that, but was losing, getting outstruck at range, and landed the big bomb, put him out. And then his last fight against Matt Mitrione, was again losing the fight on the feet. It was really by Mitrione's own doing that he lost. Shot in for a takedown, and Rothwell took advantage of it, choked him out. So he can finish. He can finish the fight with a one move, but Miocic, I think, is far more methodical. Only stopped by Stefan Struve in the UFC, and that was several years ago. I think he's really tightened up his defense since then. He's a lot more methodical with his striking. Doesn't really like to get into brawls. He did with Junior Dos Santos, took a ton of punishment, but I mean, his chin looked far more improved there than it was in the Struve fight. But his last fight with Mark Hunt, that's where I think he really turned a corner. He didn't get into a brawl with Hunt. He picked him apart at range, got the takedowns, and from there was in no hurry to get the finish. Finished him in the 5th round when it could have been over in the 3rd. And I think he's going to do that to Rothwell here. I don't see why he can't take Rothwell down all day. I don't think he gets the finish because Rothwell is just so tough and durable. If they exchange on the feet, of course, Rothwell has a chance to catch him. But Miocic, I think, has the more skilled boxing, better defensively, and he's got the wrestling and the cardio. So I like him to just take down Rothwell and pound away, wear him out for a decision. Okay, so the main event, Poirier versus Duffy, I think it's just a fantastic matchup. Will have title implications, if not right away, very soon down the road in the featherweight division. But I think it's a very competitive fight, a lot more competitive than people are making it out to be. I think a lot of the hometown nationalism is carrying over, and everyone thinks that Duffy's just going to run through Poirier. But I think it's a lot more competitive than that. What we're seeing with how fans are perceiving Duffy, I think, and I'm doing this as well, I think that we're assuming Duffy is an elite fighter, a much more high-level fighter than he's proven to be than by the guys he's beaten because of his skill level. We're seeing a really high-skilled guy with a high talent level. The way in which he's beaten his opponents, is making us assume that he can do this to better guys and that he is this really high-level fighter. But if you're just comparing resumes, Poirier's resume is far superior to Duffy's just at the UFC level. The two guys that Duffy beat, again, very impressively, are just cans. Jake Lindsay, who had been finished, now I think is finished by his 2 other opponents that he fought in the UFC. Or before that point, I think is finished by 2 guys, and then I think he lost again to somebody after he fought Duffy. And also Ivan George, not a good guy. These are very low-level guys in the UFC. And Duffy finished them beautifully. Let his hands go, showed big power, real smooth, composed technical striking against Lindsay, and then against Jorge, a very technical setup with a triangle. So seems very skilled on the feet and on the ground. He has this really dynamic defensive head movement on the feet, uses the shoulder roll that you kind of see only boxers use. We've never really seen that kind of style in MMA. And I do think that's where his advantage lies in this fight, is on the feet. I think he's just a little more technical and composed. Poirier has big power. He's a good, solid striker. But sometimes he gets into brawls and leaves himself vulnerable. The Brandao fight, the Khorassani fight, was tagged by Khorassani, a guy who I didn't even think deserved to be fighting him there. And came out on top in both of those fights. But if he's doing that to Duffy, who seems like a really high-level technical striker, I think Duffy will be able to pick him apart, come out on top there. On the ground, I really don't know. Both guys seem to be very good submission fighters. Poirier has had a slew of submission wins. His mounted triangle armbar on Holloway. He has a great Darce choke. We know he has a triangle choke from his fight with Eric Koch. But Duffy, again, I just think the setup seemed a lot more technical than what Poirier does. Poirier usually seems to... His submissions seem to be, I don't want to say forced, but, kind of have come after he's worn guys down. But Duffy's triangle against George just kind of came out of nowhere and really came from the technical setup. And again, Poirier just never having gotten over that hump. Duffy seems like the rising star. I think it's just kind of comparing their career trajectories, what's happened before, and where it seems like each guy is going. I think Duffy, just seems like this rising guy and will be another guy that Poirier just can't get past. I won't be surprised if Poirier wins. I think he could even knock him out. Obviously, his big power. Moving up to lightweight, he's shown big power. But in moving up to lightweight, I don't know, other than the power and the knockouts coming more easily, I don't know if he's really improved any. I didn't think the move was necessary in the first place, but the two guys he's beaten at lightweight, Medeiros and Diego Ferreira, probably not as low level as the guys Duffy has beaten in the UFC, but still not guys even really near the middle of the division. So I think Poirier has a real chance. This guy's a proven fighter, has beaten everyone in his path except those guys right at the top of the division. Duffy, I just think we're seeing a really highly skilled guy, and we do assume that this could be the next title challenger. So I'm taking Duffy, but could be a very competitive, close fight. Thank you guys for watching this. I hope you enjoyed my predictions. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe. Again, follow me on Twitter, and I'll be back soon with my predictions for the Henderson versus Belfort 3 fight night. Take care, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.